My name is Shannon Delaney. I'm a flower farmer here in Hurst, Texas. It's right in the middle of Dallas and Fort Worth, if you're not sure where that is. I started Sky Flower Field in 2018. I started growing at my parents' house on a couple of acres in just a small spot. I'd actually seen a video of Floret, and I was super inspired by that. It was a time in my life where I was working a lot of hours. I was young and working an entry-level job at a accounting firm, and so I was working 80 plus hours a week, and that was super stressful. So I was trying to find something to put my stress into, and so I started this garden at my parents' house, and I just fell in love with it. I just fell in love with everything about flowers and growing things in general. I just love to see planting a seed and where it can go in a short amount of time.
It's one of those things where it started out as a hobby and furthest thing away for me to have a business.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a little entrepreneur at heart, so I turn every hobby into a business in some way. But this really kind of stuck for me, and I thought, if I kind of kept with this and build it out for a certain amount of time, I could really do this full time and do it for like my career one day.
I mean, it sounds like you just really started from square zero. I mean,
yeah.
A little bit of inspiration wherever that may be, and
yeah.
Just going and actually doing it and learning by doing.
Yeah, and that's how I am just as a person. I mean, my dad and mom raised me to do everything myself and fix everything myself. My dad's a big handyman, and all of my siblings are very handy, and so I've always been one to if I want to try something, I'm going to do it, and no matter how painful it may be, I'm going to try it, and I'm going to do everything I can to make it work.
It's one thing to see things in magazines, and then to actually go
do
out
it.
and try it. If a magazine Photoshop or photo spread is not in your zone, wherever the case may be, it may be really easy to get inspired by some of those varieties or by something somebody else is doing. How were you able to adapt some of that or some of the stuff that you were seeing online from your other inspirations and adapt that to Texas?
Yeah, so I did take the Flora online. She has the online workshop, and so I took that about 2 years ago. And that's really where I learned how to grow many different kinds of flowers. And through that process, I actually learned a lot of the flowers I couldn't grow. And I feel like there's a lot of romanticness and trying all these beautiful flowers, and then you actually go out to do it and you realize that maybe your climate wasn't right for that variety or particular flower or something like that. And fine tuning and realizing what actually grows here well. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot of inspiration online, a lot of different places you can see to get that.
And at the same time, I think where we're at, we talked about the way that we can use tropicals, the way that how long our season is, and how much daylight that we have. I think a lot of times, as beautiful as the Pacific Northwest is, we have stuff that they can't do, and being able to adapt that's a challenge. Not a challenge in its own, but it's almost something that we can really lean into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the same thing. I think that you just really have to adapt to your climate. You have to figure out what your weather patterns are, and when you can plant things and when not to plant things, and when to pinch things and not to pinch things. It's really trial and error. I feel like you can read a lot of books and gain a lot of knowledge, but until you actually get out there and plant the seeds and tend to the garden, you don't know how it's going to pan out.
Right.
And you can learn a lot of things that way.
And I feel like I'm going to in this interview jump ahead, from the beginnings, because we spend a lot of time on the beginnings with farmers in general.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about what you're doing now, because it seems to me like there's several avenues by which you draw income from this. So let's give us everything you do, and then we'll kind of dissect each one of those.
So over the years, I've kind of adapted what I've done. Right now, I really do a lot of workshops and farmers markets and weddings. That's really what I kind of go into. I don't do a lot of subscriptions like a lot of other flower farmers do. I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy getting out in the community. That's really ultimately what I want out of this business, is to spread the joy of flowers and the joy of local flowers to my community. There's so many people that I've met in my small area that have been inspired by me, and I've been inspired by meeting them. So I love to do a lot of things that are that connect with people.
The weddings, to me, I'm a photographer, and I get asked to do weddings, and I always sometimes even don't politely decline. I can't.
It's a lot of stress.
I would imagine it would be, and so it seems to me like that would be the go-to in this particular segment of the industry. So I would love to know about your first wedding and how all that came about, and then we'll dig a little bit more into weddings.
Yeah, sure. And it's kind of a two-part, but my very first wedding I ever did was actually my best friend. I was the maid of honor in the wedding, and I also did the flowers, and that was intense, but it all worked out. It was during actually that winter freeze, and the flower shop was completely out of power. And so I just kind of had to work with what I had, and they were all imported flowers. I didn't know how to grow over the winter season at that point. And so it was very interesting. It was very stressful, but I really liked it. I really enjoy, just bringing that element to, of decor to the day. It's very stressful, but it's very rewarding for sure.
To me, it seems like a very safe way to get into the weddings. Doing it for a friend, because I think she would understand the expectations a little bit more.
She knew that it was like my first time. I'd taken a few classes just to, just kind of get the ropes of making a boutonniere or a corsage, and I'd done a lot of, online design courses, because that's really like what I, love to do, is design with the flowers. But yeah, that was definitely a good, toe dipping experience for sure.
And to me, it illustrates that in this one, you hadn't brought your own flowers because of the freeze, but it does illustrate that there's all the different things you need to know about growing, and then there's all the different things you would need to know about arrangements and what's kind of thing. Yeah,
and a lot of flowers that you grow may not make great cut flowers, and they may not grow tall and long and strong like for a bouquet that you would want. It's very particular, but the benefit of using local flowers too is that you're not getting these imported straight stems where you just have these straight bouquets. When you have the field-grown flowers, they're a little bit whimsical, a little bit kind of crazy, and they make the design work a lot more fun. So if you grow your own flowers and you bring them into your house to design with them, even if it's just a small little bouquet, it's so much prettier than what you just get at like the grocery store or anything like that.
Now that you've had several weddings under you at this point, what's the number one thing that people come into hiring you that their expectation needs to be adjusted when working with native species?
Almost every part of their expectations needs to be adjusted, but that's not that's not their fault. That's education. I mean, we've have flower shops that work with these imported growers, and which is that's how it's been for so long. And that's what people are used to. They're used to going into a florist and saying, I want roses, or I want peonies, or I want this and that. And, with supply chain issues that happened this year, and you can it really shows that you can't be so particular about what you want, because you may not get it. And you promise these expectations that aren't going to be met, especially if you're a local grower. Things are different every season, and you can't have a bride come to you, in the summer and say, I want tulips, because they're not going to grow. And so I've noticed with working with brides, it's educating them on the seasonality of flowers and setting the expectation of a design concept rather than a particular flower. Like they could say, I want peaches or white kind of colors, and I can make that happen. I could design them something beautiful without it having to be imported or anything like that. But yes, every part of the expectations they have to be a little bit.
That's real refreshing. When I was doing landscaping, that was the first thing I asked is, what colors do you not want?
Yes.
Because from there,
pretty much do whatever.
Then I can bring it, because when you're driving past a house, this is why I always told everybody, is when you're driving past a house, nobody notices everything if it's perfect.
Yeah.
But they are going to notice if it's not. And so if you want one thing that you can't have, and it's hell or high water, and you put it in,
it's probably not going to work well.
Everybody's going to be disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. That's setting that expectation from the start is better. It's better to disappoint them at the start. Just give them a little disappointment and set that expectation, and then over deliver in the end, rather than what you just said, doing something that isn't going to work for anybody.
I'm so excited to be talking to you, because I have a ton of questions about this that I've always been super curious about.
Yeah.
Another one I have is the scale of the wedding. So a small wedding versus a large one.
Yeah.
There has to be a ton of different considerations.
So when it comes to a small wedding, it's easy. You can do anything simple and small that you want. That's working with people who have minimal expectations as far as like the size of their wedding. It's great. But when you get to like the higher tiers and levels of weddings, it gets ridiculous. In my opinion, I don't know, that's probably a controversial statement, but
I don't think the brides will be listening here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, I mean, and a lot of that is like a facade, like it's a facade. You don't see a lot of what actually goes on. Like a lot of those big extravagant weddings with big, tall, ceiling flowers, those are all fake. Those are all really, really expensive silk flowers. They're not even real flowers. And so people don't even know
these
that.
Are coming from rental houses or the florists.
And these are like massive production companies that put these on because they're getting those big like stage grid things and they're tying up the flowers and they're lifting them up. But they have to use fake flowers for that. There's no way you can set up, doing a big event like that. You'd have to have days to set it up and your flowers would die by the time the event came along.
So whenever I was doing the brunches and stuff, and you don't know a lot about my background, but basically we had on-farm functions, and then we would go to people's places. And so there was this term that I like to coin called Texas fancy. And I think for a lot of people with as popular as Farmhouse got over the last couple of years, that I think it gives designers and flower folks a little bit more leeways to not make things as fancy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying get away with any less production because we both know that a ribbon is a ribbon, whether that's made out of ribbon or bob wire.
Right.
But I think it creatively gives us a lot of flexibility, and at the same time, we don't have to search the Netherlands or anywhere else. We can shop local.
Yeah.
Whether that's at an antique store to get pots, whether that at one of the dollar places to get a small vase that's plain and simple. And there's a lot.
Yeah.
The simplicity of the accent pieces would give us.
Yes. So I actually source all of my vases and things like that from local antique shops and vintage shops because, I mean, it's part of being sustainable is using what you have and using what's already there. I mean, I feel like you can get a lot better deals when you shop at, an antique store. And you can find some really cool vases and things like that. So I love to... And it's a fun experience for me to go and shop around and look for those.
Well, and it also gives that local economy something. Oh, I know that she's going to come in regular.
They know me when I walk in. Like, oh, you got a wedding this weekend, and they're hilarious. It's great, and I built those relationships with them in the community too. I think it's way better than just going to a big warehouse website and purchasing 10 things that are just made somewhere else. It's much better to just use something that you have.
So what's one thing you wish every bride and bride's mother knew coming to hire a local flower farmer?
I wish that they knew, or I guess that's a great question. I wish they knew more about what's in season, I guess. That would be something that I feel like, and that's just, it doesn't even just go for brides. People in general don't know what's seasonal in their area. And it's kind of crazy. People will go to a farmer's market and see avocados on the table or mangoes, and you can't even grow those here, especially in North Texas. But I think just knowing seasonal things and what's in season.
Well, let's move on to farmers markets because I know that is another third leg of the chair there. Which market do you go to?
So I've been to a few. I've actually been to like almost every one in the area. I've done the Good Local Markets in Dallas. That one's my favorite. But there's one that's a little bit more local to me. There's one that's a little more local to me. It's called Glade Parks Farmers Market, and it's in Euless over here. So I did that one last year, and I really liked it. I'm going to go back and do that one again. The one in Dallas is great. It's just far.
Of course, on this podcast, we've spent countless hours talking to farmers about them getting ready for the market, how they harvest, all that kind of thing. So this is really the first flower farm that we've been to.
Yeah.
Now that I sit here and think about it, maybe I'm missing something. But when does that week begin? Yeah. And that could be the second after the market ends.
Yeah, it really just depends on the season. This year I plan to be back in February. Normally I wouldn't be back until, May, but since it's been so warm, I've got stuff blooming. And so I'm happy to bring it when I have it. It's really just when things start going again. I would say I comfortably go March through October. I think I could extend that, February through November if I've got really good. But it's just having enough to bring every week. And I have supplemented with other growers before, but I do, when I do source flowers, when I don't bring all my flowers, I'm always bringing, other local growers and advertising them as their flowers. So it's just another way for me to bring more.
Do you feel that when people are at the market, are they buying the local flowers or are they buying the made bouquet?
So it's a mix. I mean, some people like to just buy a ready-made bouquet. Sometimes there's people that are buying it for their companion and they just want something ready-made and ready to go. But there's other people that are kind of browsing a little more with maybe they're shopping with their mom and I have a little flower bar and they love to stand there and make a little bouquet themselves. And it ends up being about the same price anyway. And so it's really just up to them. And I find, 50-50 people like to do both.
And to serve both of those markets.
Yeah, and it's fun to make to have a little flower bar and make a bouquet. It's just a fun thing to do.
At the farmer's market, what type of, are you having to refrigerate things before, keep things cool after? I mean,
yeah.
A lot of times I know that in the vase, you'll have the water. What kind of consideration?
It just depends on the season. So a lot of springtime flowers, they like the cold temperatures. And so they benefit from being in the fridge. And so a lot of the springtime flowers I will keep in the fridge until I get to the market. And usually I find it's okay because it's pretty mild outside. It's not hot, heating up the water a bunch. In the summer, I don't refrigerate any of my flowers because they're grown in the heat. I do find when you take them to the farmer's market, by the end of the day, they do get a little wilty from the water getting warm. But I've learned that, and I just switch out the water every couple of hours when I'm there. And so, yeah, I do find that being a little bit of a factor, but it's not too much of a hassle. I don't think. I've heard from a lot of growers that you absolutely have to have a fridge, and I just don't. I mean, Amanda too. Like, we don't take on that sentiment. Like, I don't think you have to have a fridge, especially if you live in Texas, because the flowers are grown in the heat.
What are you thinking about from a structure standpoint and from maybe a foundation up through the end of the bouquet? Mm-hmm. How are you putting these together, and what are you thinking about during that process?
Yeah, so I take on a lot of other growers too are the same kind of way. There's a few ingredients that you have. You have your foliage, your fillers, your focal flowers, and I think there's a fourth one. But just having a mix of those different kinds of flowers in your growing, in your garden, and then harvesting all of those. And I kind of set them up in buckets and then use a little bit of each one as I go. But I always have those few different ingredients, those supporting ingredients to make sure that each one looks great and has the fluff and the focal and the filler kind of things.
I'm always very curious as to what people are using for their greenery. And
yeah,
here in the neighborhood, I've seen you got some cedar trees. We talked about your neighbor having ferns. What type of more ornamental type stuff are you incorporating in there?
Yeah, so I've kind of gotten more into the grasses lately. I haven't been as educated on that, to be honest, because for a long time I used a lot of herbs. I used lots of basil and actually shisho. It's kind of a minty plant, and that makes a great filler. It's a great design flower.
That's one of my go-tos.
Yeah, and so I use a lot of herbs, so I don't know as much about the ornamentals. I know I've grown that feather top grass before. That's really popular and people like that. It dries really well. I'm trying to learn more about that, and actually kind of partnered up with another grower. Well, she's not necessarily a grower. She manages a prairie. Her name is Leah, and she owns the Fort Worth Prairie Farm. And so I source a lot of my foliage from her actually, and because she's very educated on natives, and I try to incorporate a lot of natives with the things that I use. It'd
be an interesting thing to do for you and Amanda and I to go to one of the wholesale nurseries that I used to buy from around here and just take the tour.
Yeah, I would love to
talk about that, because there's definitely some things you could plant.
Yeah,
you would plant that once and you'd never run out of it.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of those are perennial, and yeah, totally. I definitely need to educate myself more on that kind of stuff, because I've spent a lot of time, just figuring out how to grow the focal flowers, the pretty flowers. So now it's time to add on to the, to the foundation a bit.
And then I know we talked about this during the wedding part, but again, going back to, because a lot of people, we spend so much time with food farmers talking about packaging.
Yes.
We have to think about what the wraps look like, what the ribbons look like. I mean, what are you thinking about there?
Yeah, I mean, it's super important when you present your flowers, especially to your customer, to make them look as amazing as you can. I mean, having your brand on there and making them look pretty. I mean, it's great when you see somebody at the farmer's market walking around with one of my little bouquets on their arm with my little sticker, with my my logo and everything, and that's a way for somebody else to see it. It's really important to brand your packaging and make it look really, really nice for your customer.
Have you ever got a wedding or any event from the farmer's market?
I have. I've had quite a few people reach out to me, and that's, really, I'll be honest, I don't make tons of money from the farmer's market. I meet more people from the farmer's market that come and do other things. It's really a way for me to meet people. That's probably a bad thing for me to say.
No,
but for the amount of time and effort, I make money at the farmer's market, but for the amount of time that it takes for me to prepare for it, to be there, to clean up from it, it's really like, it's a lot of time. It's a lot of labor.
For folks and like what I had going back in Paris during the day, that was my number one source of marketing. The day it paid for itself,
yeah.
But on top of that, you also sold your other services, your other events.
Yeah.
And so I do believe, especially in the flower space, that any type of additional service that people aren't doing other than the farmer's market, that's a great way to drum up business and to make relationships.
Yeah, and I use that as an opportunity to educate them on local flowers. They may not have, before they walked up to my stand, they may have had no idea about local flowers or what was in season or anything like that. And, they walk up and they see something beautiful and they're like, wow, I would love to have this in my wedding. And, I let them know if I can or cannot do that or find something that would look similar to it. But yeah, it's a great way to meet people and just educate them a little bit and just get to know them, because it's not their fault they don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So I like to take it as an opportunity to talk with them more.
Do you feel like the HGTV shows and whatever gives people a false sense of what to expect?
Yes.
While at the same time drumming up interest. It's like now we have this crowd that really wants what they want, but they see it on TV. Going back to that magazine, they see what they want on TV. And for whatever reason, most of it being seasonal or location-based, they can't have that. But you could be the local source for it.
Exactly. And honestly, I feel like they do give, and I mean, everything looks great on TV. Everything that's made for TV is supposed to look great. That's the point. And that's just not reality, though. That's not actually life. And, when you go out to do it and you realize it's not exactly how you thought it was, I think it just depends on the person. If you're willing to, pick yourself up and try again and keep going. And I feel like a lot of people get a lot of interest from a lot of these things and try it and fail and just give up. And that's not the point. Like with a lot of things in life, like you have to keep trying and get better at it to have success with it. And so I feel like, anything that you see on TV or anything like social media, anything like that, it's not real. It's not real. So
this isn't real. I'm not really here. This camera's not here.
Exactly. No, this is real. This conversation is real. But a lot of people don't think about those kinds of things. They just see it and they're like, oh, I want to do that. And it takes a lot of work and time. And there's a lot to say for that too. There's a lot of achievement in doing those things.
So let's next talk about the classes. That's really where I started paying the most attention to you is when I knew you were doing those, especially our relationship with Amanda. I knew that she was doing that. I love Amanda so much and respect her so much. And to see her, I don't know the extent of y'all's friendship. Okay, so, but just to know that she was endorsing you and your two had going on, and you guys are so close.
Well, I think she's trying to take over a lot of the flower farming, teaching space. And I feel like I've tried to take a lot of the home gardener teaching space. Because I feel like that's what I get a lot of interest in. And I'd love to teach other classes and things like that one day. But for right now, I get a lot of interest in home gardening and turning, part of your landscape into an edible garden and flower garden. And that's what I found a lot of people around me want to learn about. And so I, started offering some classes last year and they went super well. I taught, a group of people how to soil block and about seasonality, about flowers, and gave them tours. And then in other classes, we did farm tours and then flower arranging classes. And I just heard from a lot of people they wanted to learn about what was seasonal and what you could grow here organically, because you can buy a million pesticides to kill your grass, but a lot of people don't want to do that. They want to do it the organic way or a more sustainable way, I should say. And it's hard to really learn how to do that successfully. And so I've been learning how to do that over the past few years. And so I kind of took my knowledge and wrote this 22-page North Texas gardening resource guide. It's basically from start to finish, how to start a sustainable garden and what's seasonal, how to plan your garden, how to, create a map, and what, flowers and vegetables need what spacing requirements and light requirements. And so I tried to drum up all the, things that I know about North Texas and what grows here and create that for people, because that's what they want. They want something quick and to look at and reference and reuse time and time again, because you can go to, Half Price Books and buy Neil Sperry's Guide to North Texas Gardening, but it's like 800 pages and no one's going to read all that. So it's people like things in bits. So I thought that would be a really good way to give them some good information and also teach them about it when they're here and show them, what's seasonal and offer those kinds of things.
Where are you finding your people that are coming to these classes? Like, how are you reaching out to them, and how are they finding you?
A lot of them are from the farmers market, and then a lot of them are telling their friends. All the people that signed up for my class so far, I don't know a single person. I never met any of them. Yeah. Like last year, I knew every single person that came to my class because I met them at the farmers market. But this year, I don't know a single person, and so it's kind of scary, but also awesome that it's well received and people appreciate it, and it's something that's in their area, and it's fun to come visit a flower farm, especially when this place is in full bloom. It's amazing.
Well, and it's like it's like how I'm here today. Hey, I'm coming to your house today. I didn't give you a choice, but you're opening up, to some degree, your home for these people to come tromp around in.
I love it. It's great, honestly. It doesn't bother me at all. I love meeting new people and getting them excited about it. And seeing their photos and things that they send me, a year from now, showing me their garden that they built that they were talking about before. It's awesome. Like
when you set up a class, I want to talk about a little bit about curriculum development, and how long you plan for these versus how long they actually happen, and sitting down and going, I think I want to do this. I want to teach people. I'm not an elementary school teacher. How did you develop those programs? I had a lot of things to reference because I've taken so many courses from other people. And so I had a lot of things that I've learned from that. And frameworks.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that I'm using that. It's that I've gained that knowledge myself, and I've learned how that applies to here, and teaching them that part of it is what's really awesome. Usually I just kind of think about what I would want to learn if I was coming to this class, and all the things that I didn't know that I couldn't just Google, and because anybody can Google anything, but it takes somebody who's done it and who's actually practiced that thing to give you the pros and cons of it is super valuable. So I feel like I sit down and try to write down topics and things that I really struggled with, because I feel like a lot of the times people struggle with the same things, and so that's pretty much how I figure out how I want to teach my classes. Well, it's just develop a kind of guideline.
It's refreshing to me. Like, this is the world of online everything.
Yeah.
For you to have an in-person class where it's like, look, the only thing I want to talk about is North Texas, what works here for anybody local within the Metroplex.
Yeah.
I do like that. And I think we've gotten away from that, especially the last couple of years.
Everything is online. It's all national, and which is great. There's a lot to be said for that. But it's so much better when it's hits home more, like this person's my neighbor, and I can see that they're right next to me, and they experience the same weather storms and things that I experience. So it's a lot better, I think.
We find that whenever somebody first starts something, like they're scared to do anything, whenever somebody comes out here for a workshop, do you have to it's okay to dig or it's okay to cut?
Yeah, well, I kind of do that first. That's the very first thing I do, is I kind of tell them, go crazy, because people will cut, tiny little stems and one at a time. And I'm like, no, the plant, I explain to them how the plant benefits from you cutting long stems, and how, the more you cut, the more it grows and the bigger it gets. And I had a lady that last year came to the garden and then came back 2 months later, and she was like, wow, this zinnia plant that I was cutting from, I was so scared to cut from, is 8 feet tall now. I'm like, yeah, the more you cut it, the more it will grow. And so just showing them, how to do it, give them a tour, show them how to cut and all those things is, I just let them go crazy. Because I know, when you're opening up your home and your garden to people, they're gonna mess things up. It's just going to happen. So it's just kind of part of it. And if they stomp on a flower, it's okay.
Any issues with neighbors, and you have people parking or whatever?
No, not at all. My neighbors are all really supportive of this. They come over, they join in. I don't have any issues with them. I'm in good graces with them. I make it a point though to let them know, before these things go on, that it's going to be happening, and there's going to be, a couple more cars than normal. So I just try to be respectful of that, because I am in a residential neighborhood, and I know a lot of other growers are too, and so that's kind of a thing that you have to worry about. But I just try to, be nice and cordial with my neighbors and let them know.
Right.
So that's helpful.
So I think the next thing we should talk about, which really ties in really well, is the space itself. Now, number one, it's a huge lot. Number two, the shape of it, I think, really lends itself into that classroom type learning in the way it is.
It is. It's just all straight down. Yeah, it's really nice, and it makes it easy to manage. Each bed has its own, plan, and I guess like it's been thought out, you know, each thing that I've done. I particularly place the rows this way because of rain when it flows downhill. So I know that if it flows down, like when I get really, really when I get really, really heavy downpours, the water just rushes right out. And I've tried to be really thoughtful about those things when I planned this. But that does help, you know, just having this big, long lot.
Is there a drainage ditch behind
Yeah,
us?
there is a drainage ditch back there, and then there's like a big open park behind that.
Has it ever filled up past?
No, it hasn't. And the lady that lived here before me, she had a big garden back here, and I asked her, I did get the opportunity to meet her, and she told me that in the 20 years that she's lived here, it's never flooded. So I'm not super concerned. There's been days where it's rained for like 4 days, and I'll go around and look, and it's all, when it gets a certain level, it never gets higher than that. So I think it's fine. We'll find out though with all the crazy storms that, you know, are inevitably popping up.
Well, the first thing I noticed from previous landscape experiences, well, number one, the amount of trees that you had, but in a nice area. So you have like full sun, you have partial shade, you obviously have full shade, and then you have some structural elements like this fence that's going to block off some. I think it gives you a lot of different zones.
It does, and I think that's really important too because of how hot it is here. It's not so beneficial in the winter, but in the summer when it's super hot, and it's kind of funny because the sun in the winter will be over there, but in the summer it'll be over here. So this gets a lot more sun in the summer than it does in the winter. So just even like knowing those things and what I can plant at certain times is really helpful. But it's nice to have like tiny microclimates in your garden.
So going into 2022, when's your first classes and all that?
So I have 3 gardening planning classes. They're February 12th, 19th, and 26th. They're all Saturdays, and they're from 12 to 2 p.m. And that's where I, you know, go over that resource guide and give you a farm tour and talk about all those things and starting seeds and things like that.
And then as it goes in, it sounds like you just go through the seasons with these folks. Can they sign up for all the classes at once? Or? Yeah,
they can sign up online. I've got those classes, and then then through the summer I offer doing monthly U-picks and flower arranging workshops. Those are, you can find more information about that on my website too, but those are a couple other things I'm offering right now. And I may offer them sooner, just depending on the season. I know June I'll definitely have tons and tons of flowers, but I didn't want to offer, you know, anything in April or May yet until I, you know, kind of see what the field looks like.
If you could change the space in any way, which way would you do it?
I would not change it because I've thought about this many times and I've dug around many different ways. I feel like I'm pretty settled with how I have it right now. I think I would just add some more raised beds, to be honest.
So when you're looking at buying the house, was it yard first and house second?
You know what's funny? I bought this house without even seeing it because you know the crazy Dallas home market. I was living with my parents. I just moved in with them while I was trying to find a house, and this one came up, and I wrote, you know, her a letter and sent in my offer, and then by the end of the day, that was in the morning, and by the end of the day, there were 9 offers on the house, and so they were asking for best and finals, and the person who lived here was a night nurse, so nobody could view it during the week. So it was pretty much like, if you want it, you're going to have to buy it.
Google Earth it.
Yeah, and so it looked great online. I knew I had the option period, so I figured, you know, it was worth a shot. And so I, you know, gave her my best and final, and she, you know, came back to me the next day and said that the letter that I'd written her was really nice. It was, you know, a heartfelt letter about how I wanted to do exactly this. I wanted to turn the backyard and the property into, you know, a giant garden to benefit my community. And she said ultimately that was the reason she sold me the house, is because, you know, that's what she wanted for this place. Her husband had passed away last year, and they had big plans to turn this into a big garden too. So I think it really, you know, kind of spoke with her, and it just ended up being, you know, a match made in heaven.
Right. It's hard to sell a property and to walk away, especially if you rose a family.
Yeah.
Or anything
And she
like
didn't want to. It's just because, you know, her tragic husband's death and her grandma, or not her grandma, her mother was sick. So it was kind of a series of events and she had to sell it. But otherwise she would have stayed here.
Yeah. In Texas right now, it's hot one day, it's cold the next. Planning your seed starting, I mean, how do you even start to justify any decision that you have to make in the next 2 months, knowing that we're going into our coldest season, quickly followed by it's spring?
Exactly. I think that I think you just have to plan a little bit and do a little bit of research on what you're planting, because there are tons of things that can handle, you know, a little bit of freezing cold. Like when it was 24 degrees the other day, I only covered these 4 rows. Everything else was left open, and it will come back. Just figure out what you want to grow. There's a lot of things that can be planted in a lot of cooler temperatures that you don't even realize. Like tomatoes actually benefit from a cooler temperature, and you can actually plant them before it freezes. As long as you cover them when it's going to be below freezing, just cover them up. But you can plant a lot of stuff like that out early, and you're going to have losses anyway. You just got to keep trying, keep seeding. That was actually what I learned from Amanda of Bishop Hill Farm Flowers. She told me one day just to keep planting every day, plant a seed. And I've taken that advice, and it's been great advice because I always have something in the garden.
Well, I think the plan is we're just going to visit you, like I said,
that sounds great.
Every couple of months or every quarter throughout the year and follow what you got going on. Thanks.
Hopefully next time there'll be some gorgeous flowers behind me.